Dear Newt Gingrich and Fox News. When I was a kid and then as an adult, people with the FBI in courts and Russians. And it's also, their roles planting evidences with retired police chiefs and medical families. I didn't know about it yet. They're putting fake things in databases behind my back and affecting confessions tied and planting evidences of people at the corners of the streets next to that school when I was a kid and then as an adult. They have a bunch of intelligence families as adults and kids, with that difference also used, with the difference between Republicans and Democrats also used as collusion/S, with all kind of crime methods. You guys you guys are victims/hyper victims, but you're reacting the way the breaching method needs you to. Since founding, everyone has other communicated for our founders than they communicated to us. Before I even knew how to explain this, because I read about it properly, I already knew it. And little kids do, because they're a means to show that nature is showing us. We have black people's whites of eyes, and that's inseparable from what caused slavery. And how we can discern the people that have the sciences are abridged. And abridged scientists can't defend that, and the Constitution unabridged at the same time. And they need to pretend other. They have sick prisons that are collusions with the streets and with the names of the people of the sciences. Central Connecticut State University has rules with the World Trade Center attack, with a whole bunch of countries and intercities through time, with my Wethersfield campuses I went to. Every campus I went to with names next to them, some of them, in my town, names next to them. The difference of that was used. People with collusions will tell you themselves, but no, the interbranch has been forging and switching names. Increasingly, the British Superior Court also has a victims advocates involved with overt criminal enterprises and private ones to keep people's mouths shut, and collusion/S, where they stick all sides of cases, news, and the court's names and the police forms and a whole bunch of mayors and conjunctions to mayors and their family members at the same time, putting the same predicate acts with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. See, mandated law is not followed or would have showed. In other words, the suburbs were designed tactically to nature before America's founders were born, to unfold as a landscape theater, and Hartford to unfold as a suburban/urban, and to be described that way through our own, while having been used remotely, that syntax, by also another name involved. And it's not a transnational criminal enterprise. It's not a criminal enterprise, but it has them collusion/S. Even if Sammy the Bull is not really a part of a criminal enterprise or never was. And in other words, he has roles, Sammy the Bull, with people from Wethersfield, who I never had a class with, increasingly involved with intelligence communities, intelligence families on my street, and the area in the parallel streets. It's nothing personal against them. No one wants to say that. That's how they keep people's mouths shut. They're constantly they're changing and faking what's recorded over phones. They just put whole fake phone transcripts. The same thing and changed. The same thing with digital. And Wethersfield police pretended they had conversations we had at the police station wasn't at all. As a kid, that's our gang theft, fraud, snares too. And as an adult, they have personally and professionally roles with that. And with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants and their family members. Increasingly at Trinity College involved with untimely deaths. In other countries, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, murders, and untimely death roles at the same time were brought up. And the roles with judges, prosecutors, and the FBI before and after the World Trade Center attack, with people on Zion Street in Hartford, and with Covington Street next to Central Connecticut State University in Britain, Zion Street's in Hartford. Those are intelligence communities connected and has rules with putting the fake things in the databases and affecting confessions and pretending other at corners of streets. And with the FBI, like WTNH has a bunch of people. WTNH is next to the FBI in New Haven, though. FBI has worlds of wire and digital crimes in Wethersfield police, worse than criminal incompetence through administration's roles with World Trade Center predicate acts, organized crimes at polling locations and research campuses like UConn and Quinnipiac University, Duke University. They have rules with years apart. Child abusers, leaders first forced, and at the same time, years apart, untimely deaths. With the same house with one of them involved, and a reported suicide there. That there are proofs that might have been murder. And they have whole predicate acts methods recorded, and pretending they're trying to make the prisons hard. They're involved with all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders. Increasingly, Wethersfield police have roles with Saudi Arabian people and their country too. In other words, there's a hyperforeign that uses them remotely at the World Trade Center, and a whole bunch of countries at Central Connecticut State University involved with the Russians, also with fire departments and medical campuses, putting fake transcripts roles. They have all sides. They have know how people when people are in the they're constantly putting fake transcripts. There are proofs of it. Plus, they have relative delusions recorded regarding the people speaking about crimes, a certain type of victim / hyper victim. Don't take it personal, Mr. Gingrich. And please, but don't stay that way. Please get the Wethersfield police to on paper one name and sequence. And regarding what they confessed, also a Scalora is involved with them with identity theft, fraud, slanders. And some Mendez police recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They have roles with falsified police reports, plural, for the same arrest that they used, and no writing. All exception nature show that they pretend that they they put me in a fake conversation with the older police brother, Mendez brother, and forced the Saudis to collusions with them, and ones with the name Scalora, and people with the name Demoro and Kalal said that's their cousin. Involved also with wire crimes and falsified police reports, with a whole bunch of people tied to, and as people named Mendez and their educators, involved with identity theft, frauds, putting fake ties, fake nature ties between students, fake motivations, because they have roles with a whole bunch of different countries at the same time, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and now terrorists too. Clearer than day. They can't afford to have discerned. The people of the sciences. Why there's a witch trials place next to Webb House in Old Wethersfield, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. Increasingly, there's a girl tied to that place. I don't know at all. And she tried to make fake exceptions. And with the places next to like on Church Street, there are a bunch of people tied to the corners on Church Street and conjunctions to them who have all kinds of organized crime acts roles and roles of home break-ins in my area. And with Judge Smith and a Judge Killian's further with some digital rape threats, also with Hartford courts and with Hartford Hospital, involved also in the Bridge Superior Court with some rape threats, and roles with a Joshua Julian on the Facebook page of Highcrest School with a principal upskirt nature. I recorded involved with way worse with a Joshua Julian also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with by others, and he confirmed, demonstrated true. He has rules of people in my area who have rules of all kinds of wire crimes and falsified police reports with people at UConn and next to Hartford Hospital with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, even if that was fake, about the girl being dragged to her death. That girl dragged to her death has roles of people from UConn, overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and people with the state capitol next to it with the military, involved putting fake ties, fake natures of ties between students, sequential and between neighbors, making people look like their friends, making them look like their enemies, etc. In other words, increasingly people that are hiding life progressions as collusions with predicate acts from the year before that, too. The first campus I came to in Wethersfield, I never even saw them there. I didn't even know who they were. Anyone on that street, Valley Crest Street in Wethersfield. I went 1 year to a campus there. I was in kindergarten. Increasingly, people tied to and as one's named Harris, like a Kevin Harris. They have rules of people that have been putting predicate acts and facts, put fake ties, fake natures of ties to me with a Ray Reynolds. And they're putting fake things in databases. And you know, they're trying to make people look stupid that are getting the answers right in the beginning. Because they're trying to, like, the kids around their kids and whatever, they're trying to move things for themselves. But while they're also trying to hide life progressions, they'll hurt their own kids because of what they've been putting fake transcripts and databases on mass scale. They've been more scams at hospital triages with mental health and ones with badges and gavels than there are houses and streets in our towns, in our cities, and the suburbs next to them at the same time. And these are people involved with names next to the campuses intercities, as ones involved next to Hartford Hospital, with all kinds of natures of organized crimes. And Syntax also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed with overt criminal enterprises, plural. And the cultural theme with that, no. And they have it in the prisons and everywhere. And everyone's speaking about it exactly ulterior. Everyone's changing what our founders communicated about it. Everyone's roles with the campuses framing our founders for slavery, leaving out how George Washington had to be counter-extorted, but he was glad to end slavery, but they had to leave it entrenched first. And they all had to hide their roles countering it and their actual motivations, wherein how they all did agree to an extent to admit they wanted freedom. And their motivations, they had to hide about it. Their motivations were James Madison's counter-extortion and the founders behind him, plural. George Washington, some retired general with people left over with him, didn't have means to counter. More than 13 colonies entrenched. Involved with slavery, northern colonies and southern colonies. A whole bunch of crazy things, worse than just witch trials. Sustained differences, rackets, worse than war crimes since before our founders were born. Sustained in all roles with it, though. So more and more are styles affected by a breaching method and for the breaching method to hide behind and through that with every subject treatment, with every investigator. Time collusions with all natures of killing, regardless if they know them or not. The difference in that was is used by it. It made everything unfold. You pay attention to what those kids are growing up in. With suburbs, let alone New York City. It's shocking off. You guys can't explain them both simultaneously. You're going to get it wrong. Because the breaching method designed the suburbs. Specifically to be a landscape theater with only means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts in nature, and to try to overcome the negative value nature progressions, acts in nature. As if the self-value roles with criminal insidiousness natures are positive. A means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts in nature. So, like, a truce can be used for lies. So positives aren't all. There's no. Some things are not natural, but as criminal insidiousness, and nature shows this to us. And I could donate nature shows, but you guys have to help me. I want to get myself, first of all, off the fake conversations with WFSB about the World Trade Center attack. And they have time collusions with a bunch of people in the Britain Superior Court and Hartford courts after the World Trade Center attack with these predicate acts, as their roles with West Hartford locations, New Britain locations, foreign and domestic military. And I know about, in other words, in ones from my town, off the state judicial branch, the corrections offices in Wethersfield, Connecticut. And the corrections offices know how it's on Wethersfield, Hartford's like half Wethersfield, half Hartford. That's also exploited. A whole bunch of people tied to that and spots next to it involved with sequence ships and hiding what's actually recorded. They shouldn't have hid this. The Wethersfield police, for example, when I pulled out a gun and Tony tomorrow called the police, they hid that from my parents. They have the FBI involved with a Joe DeMoro and people on Valley Crest Street. I don't even know their names. I think some of them are named Faenza, and they're educators. I never had a class with Faenza. He's involved with some sexual and medical offenders of kids and with foreign and domestic military and people involved on Valley Crest Street with all kinds of natures of organized crimes, also with their educators. Mr. Neville has collusions with them also. That's he repeated confessed his roles with an apartment on Route 3. And it's near where an Omni place used to be. Is also involved with family from Puerto Rico named Cintron, involved also with a police chief, Cintron, and his extended family, his daughter's intimate ties and locations associated with them and next to them, involved with all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders. I never saw a Mazzucato on the campus in my life, too, by the way. A John Maiano and a Mike Roberts had roles with my neighbors with identity theft, fraud, slanders with them with the FBI, judges, prosecutors, victims advocates involved with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. So these people have a lot of nerve to be using words like crimes. The reason you guys don't discern it is because each age of fact should be nature. You have predicate acts with facts methods replacing what nature and what our founders communicated that age was actually supposed to be, instructed on. These are also all kinds of medical predators, and they're pretending we're speaking about that which is overt or that which is insidious, about like there's a he-she theme, or not a she-they themed person who's recorded by the public television and by Wethersfield offices that has rules also with the sexual groups next to the campuses with their own differences. And they have black and white female judges too, with the female difference and the black-white, involved with some black KKK, Confederate flag theme, Latino theme, pretending passions and emotions, sequence shiftings, valuing the same sequence shifts, the same collusions, the same organized crimes, plural, self-valued roles with it, whole methods of it. In other words, so I don't even know all these people's names. But I know Wethersfield town offices has roles also with probation officers through time, involved with the names involved. Like the name Kerr, and Officer Jerry Miller brought that up too. They've been planting evidence on all sides of my house. Also with Inspector Mike and a Mike Del Ferro has rules with some black Italian themed, and with some probate court judges. And I don't know if they're one of the ones with Hartford Hospital. And like triages have probate court judges. Elderly homes have probate court judges because the people are locked in there. And they pretend the value of a trial or a judge is worth what is not. Including the district court is increasingly involved, of Connecticut, is involved with people involved with child abusers, leaders, and kids years apart. Brian Silver is one of the ones involved with the Connecticut District Court, also with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants and their lawyer, and their family members involved with predicate acts with facts at databases at campuses, and whole methods and natures of organized crimes, and identity theft, fraud, slanders. And the reason they have all these identity theft, fraud, slander styles, needs, and natures is because the breaching method singular needs to keep its roles with everyone with itself, with its identity theft, fraud, slander method, replacing what black people's whites of eyes communicates. Not just that we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time. While nature itself is projecting that the body of all space has existence. That which shows us that there are also other fish have two eyes. They have quality aspects of nature. They are individual species of individual bodies with all group differences generated to show us an extent of the body of all space/existence. This is not just more probable than what is pretended, most probable and practical. The names of the people of the sciences are recorded individually, grouped and together, exploited that way, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, and pretending other. Forgiveness is because if people pretend that everyone's speaking about guilt when they speak with the law, they're going to leave out the collusion/S involved with every crime scene, not just with the other countries, on and off and next to campuses, on and off the corrections offices, like their roles with establishing undercover and whatever they have with oaths with kids and adults. How they value their oath is criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, collusion, self-value. With those predicate acts with facts, replacing with our founders. With those predicate acts with facts, needs, nature, styles, pretending other, two screening roles, for replacing what our founders communicated about the breaching method. Replacing what our founders communicated about why and about how they did not have free speech. Replacing what our founders communicated about why and about how. Anyone trying to counter that was sensed, not just by internationally monitored conversations, ones that had roles of collusions with slavery, not just entrenched northern colonies, but northern colonies and southern colonies, not just through criminal enterprises, overt and private criminal enterprises and terrorists, collusions with a whole bunch of countries, but a hyperforeign there too. Any grouping of countries that tries to counter with this cause and keeps, as long as there are locations, areas, and states, entertained nature of logic as is. Two, collusions with pretending not to realize that mistakes can be made in court. Collusions could be there with way worse crimes. What really makes people, they're changing when people get mad too. They're just faking transcripts on a mass scale. There are proofs of it. They have all. You know what they do too? They had me look over, and they had a sheet tied on a bed at Sandy Hook Prison. They put me in there when I was arrested for harassment. When I didn't even speak, I just called back a bunch of times because they kept calling me back and calling other people and leaving messages. When I caught them with a child abuser, untimely guest brought it up. And people with names Scalora, increasingly with Glastonbury Intelligence, New Britain Intelligence, Central Connecticut State University, Wethersfield interbranch offices, involved with some sexual and medical offenders. I don't even know these Scalora. They have a bunch of people named DeMoro and Colo involved with them too, with falsified police reports. They confessed to the names Mendez involved. And that's also recorded and demonstrated. Their roles with New Britain Superior Court with people named Mendez involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, including judges' roles, including women judges' roles, with some black KKK, Confederate flag team, Latino team, falsified police reports, identity theft, fraud, slander. The same ones involved with wire crimes and people that have been played together in South my street through time. Fake ties, fake nature ties to me, also with Facebook pages, interbranch. Wethersfield police have wire and mail crimes and digital crimes. Also with an officer Poison, also collusions with more sexual and medical offenders of kids that he forced with his digital crime methods and delusions Now, there are also people with the name McGee, officers switching names with the name McGee. They confess this, that they only have one name, officer named McGee, and that they were influenced to switch names with different arrests, too. And there's a woman with that name, too, apparently, with Rocky Hill campuses, we're supposed to be medical experts and drug experts involved with all kinds of organized crimes, framing people, uses of their roles with all the different things, all kinds of, in other words, we're going to examine how, like, they have all these synthetic things, like, for higher THC levels and things like that with their, but then the marijuana, they have it disgusting tasting and cheap because they're using that for evidence as rackets. They're also framing people for using alcohol, and they're coaching people to do that online. Or I was just calling you alcohol. In other words, increasingly, people tied to a Christopher Cullen from my area and involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids. He's involved with the intelligence community, with some judges, family members. There's a Jennifer Smith. I never had a word of conversation with her. They're involved with a Joe DeMauro and a Ray Colon and a whole bunch of people tied to them with the intelligence community, with a whole bunch of other countries and their educators and mayors from Wethersfield, involved also with criminal enterprises and private ones with houses and names next to the state education department, involved also with a Ruth as one of the ones tied to a former mayor, increasingly involved with, through administrations with differences rackets, including the difference between Republican, Democrat, Independent. You guys couldn't speak about independence or unity because you have our founders' communications replaced right through your campuses. You were child abused. Please follow mandated law. Get me off fake conversations with WFSB. They had time collusions with the intelligence next to Fox Connecticut News and the sources of them and the names at those buildings next to them and the systems tied to them, like Social Security, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with a bunch of people tied to and as, and Anthony Yagman, also involved with the Mendez brothers, with foreign and domestic sexual and medical offenders of kids, of adults, putting everyone to fake transcripts and databases collusions, intercities and intra-cities, intercampuses. The ones with the name Domain and Mendez, also involved with their educators behind my back and try to make fake acceptance. Like I did not respond to the Miss Riley. People with the name Riley tied to a Mike Domain and Adam Domain. I never met the Adam Domain. And they have collusions with a whole bunch of people tied to their area, and which is next to parks. People next to parks, in other words. And fields are also forced to collusions. In other words, everyone's forced everyone to speak through others, but at the same time, they want to defend the value of their identity, their difference as police, as courts. They're nuts. They're not following me. That's why they can't get on. I've been asking since I was a kid to get them on paper. Increasingly, there are connections between. So that was the first campus. Increasingly, people on that street, on Valleycrest Street, have collusions at each campus I went with people behind my back putting big things in databases. And with this Ray Reynolds, who was in my campus at that class. He's increasingly tied to the DeMauro family and people involved with state police, interstates, and with Middlesex Community College. And that was before I went there. I never saw him at Middlesex Community College, Ray Reynolds. I never saw him on campuses, except for when I was in kindergarten for 1 year. And then that school closed that year. In other words. And then the next school I went to had a bunch of people involved with my neighbors who moved in when they were in 4th grade on my street here where I am now. Intercedes, they've been planting evidences. It's something to do with their roles on off the state corrections offices, judicial branch offices, and their roles with the houses and businesses next to Hartford Hospital, with the differences of their guilt there with criminal enterprises or at the hospital too, including private criminal enterprises and all kinds of delusions too. These are supposed to be experts on reason with mental health. Hollywood, And the exceptions, like, interstates and internationally. They have roles with psychiatry right through world wars, where Germans and Americans had collusions against themselves. Russians too. Russians have roles with Hartford Hospital and a bunch of fire departments in ways that they're implying and demonstrating has to do with nuclear and rights to lie that are used for where they don't have the right to lie. And they just, on a mass scale, they're just putting fake transcripts, including with the news. Ron Adams is another person, I don't know him, but he's in one of the ones in the comments. My neighbors confessed Joshua Julian is involved, and Ray Clough with his comments on YouTube as one of the ones involved with the Principal Upskirt Nature's Campus Facebook page and the Britain Spears Court's Facebook pages involved with predicate acts, rape threats, and sexual and medical abuses of kids, other natures of organized crimes at the same time. It's the families involved with the security with the campuses, with the schools too. And there was a security guy named John. He put something fake with a nurse at my school. Had something to do with a guy Dinavelis and his roles, jumping a fence and running towards a Fred Griset's house near the Wethersfield High School, which is Fred Griset sought me out as a stranger on my street to record, confess, demonstrate his roles with, sexual and medical offenders of kids and people involved with modern pastry and Mazzucato Bakery named Maiano. He didn't tell me that name. I found out that name after my class graduated, and he sought me out to make confessions as a stranger and demonstrations. These are people that hide things from the people who influence them to plant evidences. But sometimes it's themselves, sometimes it's them. The difference of that is played too, because there is constantly a hyperforeign that shows them that they need to highlight progression. Such ways, all natures of investigators have been used remotely, criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions, raw. So FBI directors, plural, have roles with World Trade Center predicate acts and with the policing of the internet companies are being tortured, fact-cheating nature extorted, and fact-cheating nature enslaved. But they can't explain this without confessing for the breaching method, their roles with that against ourselves. All kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders. We're like with Facebook. Facebook has rules. Sometimes their people had to change the fake digital evidences. In some ways, the FBI, some ways the Wethersfield police, some ways the military. The Marines increasingly have collusions with Facebook too, and the FBI does. And they faked conversations with me with Wethersfield police as a kid, and I was an adult. It wasn't at all. They faked me in transcripts that weren't at all. We didn't have words with them, so they faked it. And the kids who did go down and speak with them, they forced them to put fake things, fake ties, fake natures ties to me, and screen their roles with overt criminal enterprises, private ones. And this Sammy the Bull and his narratives regarding cultures and regarding the Puff Daddy trial and regarding the FBI and courts and New York City. These are people involved with the court next to the World Trade Center and names at the World Trade Center and spots next to it, including the court next to it. Inside the court, the Ninth Circuit Court, right before the World Trade Center attack, or sometime before it, they had changed the legal timing of when the papers were brought to the court and time-stamped. And then they presented the court as if it was handed in late, the legal papers, the panel of judges that were in the Ninth Circuit Court right before the World Trade Center attack tower next to it, and the court next to it. And so they ruled it was filed late. But then after that, and then that was proven that there was sequence from inside the court. But also names on all sides of that case and their sources were recorded, attached to fake change communications to by the news and by the FBI and by courts, interstates. Also has collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and the terrorists. Wethersfield police, Rocky Hill police families, Newington police families, they have personally and professionally roles of predicate acts in my street with the same name /S, and one's tied to them, like a Robert Rodriguez, who brought up this name Scalora too, who was brought up in a confession by police. So they use confessions to make it look like they spoke with you. One guy forced himself through my door. I was alone. And he said, don't mess with the Scalora. Also sequence shifting, and to make it look like I brought up a Scalora and make it look like I know the Scalora. And there was a whole bunch of people named Scalora recorded involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, with people from other areas on my. I never saw them on my street in my life. They're increasingly involved with people with collusions on my street from other areas, with people from other areas tied to people on my street planting evidences, like the Robert Rodriguez who brought up the principal child abusers campus to me first. And they forced that. And then he was caught off campuses anyway. And they are increasingly involved with shopping centers and malls as people involved with the security and the medical and other natures of databases roles and positions with the campuses and their family members, and how exploited. It wouldn't be exploited, and they wouldn't stay evil if you guys would follow mandated law. You guys are leaving them with the interbranch, the state judicial branch offices, the corrections offices. It's every court. It's the difference of the guilt there or the names next to it or traveling by too. It's manifest that way because of how there were our collusions and roles, needs, and natures pretending other, as styles therefore are incapable of defending that and affording to have discerned how our breaches method, how our founders want us to pay attention to that. They have our founders' words interpreted, leaving out what they declassified. They had declassified for themselves because they didn't have free speech at the time. Prepare your mind. In other words, vaccines. Get them on paper, one name and sequence. The Diddy trial it's reportedly that the prosecutor is James Comey's daughter. James Comey, even if that wasn't him, a guy who looked just like him. James Comey has collusions with the Britain Superior Court anyway. Also with former director of the FBI, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organizations Act. Also, they have roles with the United Nations with all kinds of drugs and medicines crimes and communications racketeering, worse than war crime. Also with whiting forensics, all kinds of forensics rackets with everything. In other words, before it was the Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organization Act, it was ACA, the Organized Crime Control Act. No. Vaccine.